Good evening, everyone. Probably the last session, I think, before, or us standing between you and dinner. So I think let's get going. We're going to be talking to you a bit about what we've been doing in terms of trying to provision a chat capability in our system that interfaces with different types of technologies. One of them is WhatsApp, and then also, actually different types of channels into the system and then out of the system as well. And some of the things that you might have to think about in terms of legislation, but we'll cover those as we go through the slides. All right, so to introduce ourselves quickly, my name's Chris Costner. I've been with MIP for about 24 years, I think, and I think in the progress field for about 27 of that. And then I head up our research and innovation division at MIP. So we're responsible for implementing all sorts of like building block types of functionality that our other systems get built on top of.
Mm-hmm. I'm Noreen, also work at MIP, and I'm the head of continuous improvement. So we use implementation and all of that.
Right, so we'll just work through these bullet points and then, work our way slowly through to the Q&A session. But I think this is the write-up that was on the slides, or for our presentation. You probably saw that, so I'm not going to go through that. That was really a mouthful. We'll try to actually make it sound a little bit less daunting than it does look there. So we'll just start with a quick introduction to MIP.
So we're a proudly South African company. We've been a Progress partner for many, many years, and a Progress user for over 30 years already. We're nearly 500 people strong, 400 of them being software engineers. We run multiple financial systems in our business, of which we look after 22 million beneficiaries on our systems. And quadruple P, that's for people, purpose, profit and
planet. Yeah, essentially talking about corporate responsibility.
Yes.
MIP has got a big focus on that. Right, so just some more information quickly. MIP started servicing just customers in South Africa. Since then, we've grown. We currently look after, or we've gone into about 12 countries within Africa. And then with our latest division that we introduced as well, it's International Outsourced Division, where we contract Progress resources to Progress customers that might be looking for some capacity, whether it be short-term or long-term. And then the journey of MIP has been a long one. Like we said, we've been around for, I think close to 30 years plus now. Yeah. And within that time frame, it's become evident that, you need to invest in your technology stack, right? And to that end, MIP has developed its own development framework that the developers use to write our own systems on top of, or using those development frameworks. And then we've also, like I said, mentioned, we've got a centralized tool package, right, that's responsible for, or that we use to build all of our other financial services administrations on top of. That would contain stuff like workflow, communication management, all those kinds of things that we refer to as the digital stack. And then, as Noreen mentioned, we have a few financial services administration platforms. In there, we've got medical aid systems, pension fund systems that you would be familiar with, lending, and group risk and insurance, life insurance, those kinds of things. And then that second big bullet point that talks about the investment in people. One of the things that we've realized for a long time is that we do battle to get Progress developers, software engineers. And it's something that we looked at very keenly, and we've developed our internship training program, where we take on a bunch of software, or soon-to-be software engineers, and we train them up in Progress. So the Progress focuses on identifying aptitude. So we take kids that's straight out of school, we take university graduates. It doesn't really matter. Even some people that might want to enter the software development environment, but they show an aptitude. We test for that through a few different processes. and then they eventually then join the internship program. They get placed in the training division, and they're taught Progress and also the digital stack for the first 3 months. They develop a system that they then present to the directors, and so they learn a whole bunch of skills, not just necessarily development, but also presenting, preparing, all of those kinds of things. And at the moment, we're averaging about 50 developers that we're bringing through that program every year, right? So the classes vary in size. Sometimes, I think on the lower end for the last while, we've been at 16, a class of 16. And the last 2 classes, I think, were in the region of 25, 30 developers that we take on board and train. So it is quite a daunting prospect at some stages, but it's yielding good results. And as we said earlier, more than 400 full-time software developers, and I think, I'm not quite sure, but I'd say 250 upwards of them came through the internship program actually over the last couple of years.
Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about the timeline and how that fits within our omni-channel movement. We're going to show you some workflow and some comms, and then obviously the timeline as well. Those are the elements of the digital stack. They are too much to discuss today, but they all make part of the stack. Okay.
Right, so if we look at the business use case for the consumer timeline, I think I want to just clarify a few word choices as well, because MIP sits in this weird position where we're actually developing software for big corporates, right, or corporate users that themselves then have their endpoint users or customers down the line. So I think for the purposes of the demonstration, to try to, if I'm hopefully consistent, I'll refer to customers as MIP's direct customers, the corporates, right? And then consumers would refer to the endpoint clients, the policyholders, the members of a medical aid scheme, right? So consumer means endpoint, and customer is the bigger corporates. So when we were tasked to develop a timeline, what we wanted to do was enable the customers to provide a very professional external view to their consumers, right? And with that, if you think about typical queries, when you're dealing with someone, the more they seem to know about the situation and the query that they are bringing to you, the more professional your organization seems if they've got full track and history of what's been going on, They can see potentially that you've already had a call to the call center, or you have contacted them with WhatsApp, or those kinds of things, One of the biggest gripes that I always have when I interact with some of the other WhatsApp providers that we've got functioning in South Africa is whenever you get put through to a different agent, somebody else to further help you with your query, you always have to start from scratch. You have to explain to them all over again why it is that you're contacting them. And we wanted to avoid that with our implementation. So to that end then as well, the timeline, like I said, is there to try to better manage the consumer between the digital and the physical world, right? And then the timeline's further purpose then to give you complete situational awareness would be to allow you to drill down into each of the events that occurred in the timeline so that you can get more detail about that to better assist the people. Okay, so we'll clarify some of these terms a bit more as we go along. Then we'll also show you chat, right? The chat capability that we've built that now fits into is one of the pieces that you'll see on the timeline itself, right? So why did we want to go and implement a chat capability? One of the reasons is that we're entering this digital phase, in businesses more and more. But what consumers expect is the ability to self-help, in other words, help themselves as far as they can, possibly as quick as possible as well. So chat affords us that perfect opportunity to do that, where we can have more streams of communication coming into the business, right? And then at the same time, within those streams, because they're digital, it also affords us the opportunity to introduce a lot more automation along the way, right? And with the automation comes the ability for people to be able to help themselves. right? And we also found that with the chat platforms, you get a higher level of engagement from users as well. You know, they're interested to use the technologies, help themselves, be able to resolve their queries much quicker than they would have to, you know, get on a telephone call, hold for 15 minutes before the next agent becomes available, you know, and then try to talk to them and then phone back later with some documentation that they need to send through. You know, it just becomes chaotic that way. So we're trying to better that process that we offer the users. And then in some cases you do have typically your older type of consumers. They are the ones that would more like the opportunity to talk to a normal human. So in these chat implementations, what we do have is a fall through that they can eventually then go to and speak to a normal person on the other side of the conversation. Okay, we'll show you all of these things. One of the other things that we needed to try to keep into consideration is stuff like GDPR and POPI, right? And those things are various flavors of essentially data protection laws. Each region or country, they develop their own laws. In South Africa, we refer to it as POPI or POPIA, the Protection of Personal Information Act, where it's corporates' responsibilities to make sure that data is kept safe. You're processing it in accordance. There shouldn't be identifiable information easily available. All of those kinds of things you have to adhere to. So we try to take that into consideration when we provision chat as well. Then, when we talk about omni-channel communication, you know, we try to say, you know, it's essentially different channels of communication. And with that, we've got emails, SMSs, chat conversations, USSD. So typically in the lower income segment in the African continents, people generally don't have smartphones. So they still run these old, normal types of handsets. And with those, the level of interaction that you've got with them is usually through the USSD protocol. So that enables us to be able to target even lower income segments, you know, within Africa. Okay, and the nice thing about some of the USSD functionality that you get nowadays is you can have a server-originated conversation. Back in the day, you had to like go *134# and then some weird number or whatever to be able to have the consumer contact the business. But nowadays, you can actually from the server-originated conversation outwards, which is actually a lot better. Right. WhatsApp. WhatsApp is, I don't know, who of you are familiar with WhatsApp? You guys are. So in South Africa, WhatsApp is huge. But it seems like in America, the penetration for WhatsApp is only something like 17%. But in South Africa, it's something like 96%. 96%. To try to give you an indication. Very high. But it's essentially something like, if you're more familiar with Facebook Messenger, it's just a normal instant messaging platform, you know, where you can send out a message, you know, or have conversations around these things. We briefly mentioned a consumer timeline, and what we mean with that is essentially it's just a line that's plotting the events that happened chronologically. So you could see essentially, you know, on the 31st of January, this guy sent an SMS into the business, or you sent him an email, or, you know, it's essentially just a line plotting events that happened over time in a chronological order. In some of the slides further down, we're also just going to briefly mention digitalization. And that is just typically the process where businesses start to use digital technologies to explore different avenues of revenue or to improve the streams that they already have in the market. So it's becoming more online. You'll also see us talk about digital socialization, and I think that touched on or is in line with what Oleg was saying earlier in the opening session, the general session, is you need to start providing an experience for users, right? And digital socialization is the concept of, you know, we want to provide a digital, you know, interactive and inclusive user experience. You want to make the user feel like you're really paying attention to them, as opposed to just having a bunch of dead screens kind of thing, you know, where they need to navigate and, you know, the typical type of business layout if you just do plain digitalization. When we talk about chat in these presentations, what we refer to is a digital conversation that we've got with someone, right? And the participants that we've got in our chats, you'll see, can either be human or they can be bots, right? So with that said, I think let's have a look at what we typically see in the business landscape, right? We want to go from the typical business use case where people generally measure SLAs, you know, and we want to step away from that SLA-driven service level approach that businesses usually have, right? And we want to get to a state where we more socialize or socially interact with the users. Okay, and I think that's what we're going to try to highlight with this slide. But essentially, the normal business landscape is you've got the business on the one side, you've got their machines in the middle, and you've got the consumer on the other side, right? That's typically you trying to make use of a service from a company on their websites, right? And like I said, in the traditional landscape, these things are usually service level driven, okay? A typical flow of this is you might have somebody that's trying to sign up for a policy online. So you've got the website that hits the service process the request and look at the product rules and all of those things, pricing that's required there. And then typically at the end of this process, you've got a confirmation email that goes out to the user saying, welcome, you know, this is your policy document, and it's kind of end of story. But when you start to socialize with your customers, then you'll see that it's essentially the flow is sort of like reversed. You've got a lot more interaction that you'll actually get from the consumer side. Queries about claims not being paid, or when is it going to be paid, how much benefits you still have left, all of those kinds of things. You know, the request flow is then on the reverse side. And now what we're trying to do in this whole process, like we mentioned earlier, is take any type of channel that user would have preferred to communicate into consideration as well. So in other words, some people prefer WhatsApp, some people prefer SMS, some people have no option other than USSD, you know. So then in that case, what will end up happening is you'll have a user start a conversation with WhatsApp, right? And then depending on the channel that you can come in, because with WhatsApp for business, you can register multiple channels. So you can register a channel for claims and or register a channel for admin queries, right? Different types of channels. And depending on what channel you have the communication come in on, you'd want to determine whether you assign them a bot or whether you assign them a person that actually needs to deal with this query. And then eventually when the business then responds, they need to respond on the channel that the guy elected to converse in. So it doesn't help that the guy comes in with a WhatsApp query and you respond to him on email. That's not necessarily going to create a very good user experience for him. So in this particular case, then you'll see that the more you personalize this, the more you start focusing on the customer experience. You know, the fact that they remember that they can get efficient help, you know, it does wonders for business and query resolve times. Okay, so I think we've mentioned a few things. Let's quickly put some of these things into a demo for you to see.
Okay, so this is the MIP system, the digital stack. Sorry. The digital stack. I'm going to quickly show you guys what our timeline looks like on our normal screen. Okay, so I'm just going to find a person, and this person we're going to look at, her name is Janae van der Berg, and when we look at her profile, the screen went right down to the timeline. This is now the interaction that Janae has had with the system. So whether she phoned in or whether she contacted, let me just move down a little bit, whether she contacted us through a chat or whether she sent an email and we started a workflow, or whatever her interaction was, the system shows the interaction. So there you guys can see this was the 28th, and there was the 19th, and there was the 15th. And we can also use these indicators to show us, if I put down workflow, it will show me only those. If I take off communications, it will only show me those. So we have like links to the actual document or whatever it was that she sent in. So if I click it there,
so if you remember, we talked about the drill down capability. So from the timeline, what we are doing there is we're showing the events that happened, and then we also then showing you the type of an event with a description of that, and then the ability to click through to that specific item. Now, in that particular case, obviously, because it's a demo type system and we can't really show ID documents, we just had a photo there of a PC.
Yeah. So if I click those on again, it will put them back all in sequence. So if Janae phoned in and she spoke to a customer service agent, the agent would see, okay, this was the last chat, this is what the customer said, this is what the agent said, and interactive, you know, we would be able to follow the process that was handled. Okay, then I'm going to quickly...
Do you want to maybe show one of those chats quickly?
Oh, the chat, yeah?
Yeah, so just there.
So this chat happened between me and Janae, and it started like that, and she said, okay, they're welcome to WhatsApp, that is just a template message, and here is a document.
So we'll obviously show you a chat in a bit more detail, but the point here is the fact that we just wanted to show that on the timeline you've got the ability to go back to anything that has happened, click on it and get more detail to be able to resolve that query.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go back here, I'm going to go to chat. So chat really refers to different kinds of interaction. Basic chat talks to users, two system users talking to each other. In a lot of our systems, we have healthcare systems where we have two users talking to each other about a case perhaps or something like that. Then they use chat to interact with each other, and we save that conversation onto the actual case. If we go here to the plus, that's where we have the system user. So that would be system to system user. I'm going to show you guys quickly. That would be a group chat, and that would be WhatsApp then. WhatsApp then refers to the external third-party user. Okay, I'm going to show you guys that quickly. So here, if I go, I want to talk to Marty. I'm going to say start. It would create the chat and add it there for me. There we go. So I'm going to say...
And hopefully Marty's online. She said she would be.
Hi, Marty. Oops, let me open it up a little bit.
So what you'll see as well in the chat window is we did include the same kind of notification types of things that you would see in WhatsApp, where a check mark shows delivery, and if Marty actually did read the message, that little icon would change to an eye so that you can see that.
Yeah, and she's not there.
Not there.
Okay, that's all right.
So what we also did, like Noreen said, with a system group chat, the intention there is you might be, one of our customers runs a legal assistance type of software, and you might have, there we go.
There we go.
Marty is online.
Yes. So see the little tick went to an eye when she actually read my message. Okay. I'm going to close this one now. And
I just wanted to quickly wrap up with system group. No, it's fine. So, you know, you might have a bunch of lawyers discussing a case over a few months or years or whatever the case might be. And in that situation, it is nice to have the chat between the lawyers where they discuss maybe the finer points of the case, always there, ready to be referred back to.
Okay, so in here, I've opened my WhatsApp online so that you guys can see what I'm doing. This here at the top is MIP's demo number that I'm going to use, and I'll be the outside person WhatsApping in. So I'm going to say hi, and what I've got here is a menu bot going to answer me. Hello, and there it says, okay, thank you for contacting MIP, please select the department that you wish to continue. So we did this with a menu bot that is configured through config. Okay, so I'm going to say, okay, I want to talk to you about number 8, and it would find what I've saved next to that. Okay, and there it says, okay, we can talk about the digital stack, or we're going to talk about engineering, or MIP creative, or what, or I can click 6 if I want to speak to an agent. So for me doing this, I'm still speaking to the bot. So now I want to speak to an agent, and what will happen now is it will take my conversation and it will link it to a workflow, and put it in the box for somebody to pick up. Because now, when you think about WhatsApp, WhatsApp really means that somebody's going to respond quickly, and you have to set up your users to respond to that quickly. So we connected it to our workflow. I'm going to show you guys here. If I go my work, that will take me to my personal workflow inbox, and here is my query. So if I click it, we'll see my conversation. Here is my conversation linked to my workflow. I'm going to open it up a little bit. Okay, so that was me. Remember, I said number 8, and then I said number 6, and this, hi, we're waiting for an agent to pick up your ticket. That was automated messaging that was built inside my workflow to let the user know we're giving your work to somebody, and then we sent that one to say, okay, somebody's got it. So if I say, hi, how can we help you? My message, let me just move this down a little bit, would be there already. You guys see how quick it is? It is really fantastic because the movement of information is really, really quick. So when you move on to that interaction with your user, the response would come quickly. And now I can go and save this conversation to Janae, or to the user that I'm actually working with. And this conversation would be linked to her. Let me just open it up again. Oh, I can't see so luckily. There we go. So if I wanted to send Janae a document, say she's asking, can you send me this? Literally, I would go and I would say, okay, let me send you a proof of payment document. And literally, that is how quickly the movement would become. Similarly, okay, but I'll tell you the guys just that.
WhatsApp then?
WhatsApp, oh, yeah. So there's my document.
There's the document that she sent as well.
There it is. And there is the document. So the movement of information really becomes a lot quicker. You know what I'm saying? And for us and our clients, that I think was the biggest need was the movement of documents, and the documents, the actual document.
Gathering of documents as well, because you can have that process sit in a loop in the workflow, making sure that you ask them, please attach your ID document. So it's bi-directional. If you uploaded something to WhatsApp, then it will be available in the chat conversation as well.
Okay.
So what I wanted to mention is the menu bot, as we've shown you, is essentially a menu that you can set up in our system, right? And you can set it up however many levels deep that you want. And at each of the menu items that you have and that you display to the user, you can either have it go drill down and display a submenu, or you can attach a piece of code that executes a piece of business logic. So you might have, let's say, an entry that says, show me my current claim limit. So without even going to a user, once you've navigated the tree to that point, you can execute a piece of business logic that actually fetches the data from the system and injects it into the conversation. So again, you get to that situation where people can help themselves a lot easier, depending on how you set up the menu and how much time you actually spend hooking it up to your background pieces of code that you execute. Right. So I think...
we did speak about this.
No, it's fine. So one of the things that we try to incorporate with chat as well, like we said, we've got to think about GDPR compliance or GDPR compliance. And that means there are certain things that you can use from some of the technology enablers or vendors like InfoBip, okay? The problem for us is if you use that, InfoBip I think is a European company. Now, what we weren't sure of at that stage is if they even had cloud-hosted services in South Africa, which means that if we did go with them and they didn't have locally hosted stuff, are we running foul of the data protection laws? So in terms of that, what we opted to do with these platforms is you could also pop your messages off. And when you remove the messages off of their platform that they allow you to talk through to WhatsApp, then you essentially then can host that data locally in your database. And then with our customers running our systems on-premise, that means everything is local. We're not running the system across multiple countries where we potentially have no control of what they do with the data outside. So in this particular case, what we do is we pop the messages. One of the other things that we are very mindful of the implementation that we're doing with WhatsApp, or chat, I should rather say, is that we want to make sure that the functionality that we'll expose through chat is the lowest common denominator of what the various platforms might supply. So in other words, if we decide to allow somebody to come in through Viber or Facebook Messenger, what we'd like to do is for the user experience to be the same inside the system as well. So therefore we won't necessarily implement WhatsApp's API to the nth degree, because then we might limit ourselves further down the line. Okay, we mentioned all of the different types of chats, right? So if we, for some of you that might be a little bit more technically inclined, or wondering about how we implemented it, from the chat backend perspective, that's running as a Spring Boot application through Tomcat. That supports WebSockets, typically WebSockets that's compatible with SockJS. Okay, and the nice thing about that implementation, it supports fallback through to different channels. So if it notices that it can't connect to a specific WebSocket, then it would actually start transmitting its messages over HTTP, which means you've got a high degree of fall through and reliability then on these channels as well. And then the other benefit of that is because this is now running through Tomcat, we communicate with the PAS-OE back end through REST services, both ways. So we don't expose sockets directly to the outside world from, let's say, PAS-OE or from the Tomcat applications. Essentially, when we talk to the PAS-OE backend, it's through a typical REST call, or we could initiate conversations from the Progress backend through REST calls back through Tomcat out to the outside world, okay, which is essentially, I think, what you saw at some stage. We do make sure that you have to have a valid session when you communicate with the backend, so it's not a free-for-all open thing. If you are not connected, authenticated, or you are not allowed to talk to the backend. So, we do make sure that there's some level of protection. And then on a slightly more technical note, I think what the premise of what we've implemented is there's a variety of channels that you can communicate on, right, with these messaging platforms. And within each channel, there's a different type of scope. And scope refers to what level you want to potentially broadcast your message on, okay? So in a channel that is potentially maybe called direct chat, you might then say, well, I've got a scope where I can talk to a specific window. Like if you remember seeing the application, then with the chat window popping up, we have the ability then to target that chat window itself and only send messages over there. We also have the ability to talk to a user potentially directly on a specific session that he might be logged into, okay? So no matter which window was open, this current session that I was maybe logged into and dealing with workflow, I can talk to that session. Or we've got a scope where we can talk to a user no matter which session he's logged into. So if he had 5 tabs open, we could talk to all 5 tabs simultaneously if we broadcast the messages on user level instead. And then there's one special type of scope that we've got, and that's the global scope. Global scope, we'll see, that's essentially where we will send messages where we'll maybe update the chat list on the left-hand side. So you might have your chat window open where you see your list of active conversations on the left-hand side, and all of a sudden you'll see a new chat pop in there. That's talking on the global scope, you know, and what you'll see is the new chat that popped in there and maybe just the last line of communication that happened there, but we won't bring back all of the details of that. Yeah, so that basically highlights what I've just said about the global scope. You know, typically for your list updates, but not necessarily detail. Then also to reduce the chattiness of the messages that we send across the network, what we don't do is broadcast everything all the time. It works on the principle of if you subscribe to a channel, you will receive messages on it. So if you think back about the chat window that you saw, if you click on a specific chat on in the list view, or if you had a view that opened up that was directly in scope of a normal conversation without your list update, right? You subscribe to that conversation, and we'll only send messages for that specific conversation, okay? When you click on another chat, if you had the list view, then we'll unsubscribe from the active chat that you did have and subscribe to the new chat. Again, like I say, to minimize traffic and only send the relevant communication to try to reduce network chattiness. And then obviously there's those normal kinds of things. If you click on a chat, you know, we'll make a call then to fetch the details about that chat and maybe, let's say, the last 10 or 15 messages that you'll see in the viewport. And what we also implemented then is lazy loading of messages. So if you scroll back and you wanted to get more detail of a conversation, only then will we get paged data of, let's say, the next 15 or the previous 15 messages. Again, so that we keep this performant and not have users wait for 3 days while you load the 2-year-old conversation kind of thing. Right. We also support meta messages or system messages, where we do things like, if you've ever used Teams, I'm pretty sure you said, you know, or you would have seen somebody change the title of this chat to business query or something. Those kinds of messages we deal with, or we refer to as meta messages. You can see where the participants were added. You can change the level of security, so you can add, and you can say people are not allowed to change the title, or they're not allowed to add new participants or remove participants. You can control all of that within, and you'll see those interactions coming through as the system messages. One of the things that we are working on that is not completed yet, but it's in the design pipeline, is what we'll refer to as the ability to whisper in a conversation. And what we mean with that is literally like you would typically have between two people, where they would whisper, and you know, not everybody else in the conversation would be aware of that. And the reason we'd want to implement that is you might have somebody coming in with a conversation, and there are different technology providers that we can interface with that would ask knowledge-based questions of a person, right, to try to verify that that person is who they say they are. So you might ask them, what's your ID number? And you might say, based on these 5 options, what is the transaction that you recognize that went into your account last week or something? You know, stuff that only that user would know. But what you don't want to have happen is normal users looking at the conversation afterwards, participants, you don't want them to glean the information, the personal identifiable information about that. So the premise of what we're implementing with Whisper conversations is you will have the authentication bot sitting in on the conversation. They will converse with the user or the consumer, verify who they are, and if there's a successful verification, they'll obviously be allowed to access APIs that might be available on the menu bot or all those kinds of things after you made sure that you're not going to be sending somebody information that they shouldn't. But it does mean that if Noreen looks at the conversation, she'll never saw what was whispered, you know, which is a nice way of dealing with that kind of level of authentication, but not exposing it to the users. And then again, therefore, running foul of your POPI legislation. Right, when we look at the front end, we implemented that with Kendo UI for jQuery, right? And the typical components that we used there was just the window widget, right? The list views, and we used the list views with the template to be able to construct that list that you see on the side about new conversations and the last message, right? And something that was interesting for us with Kendo UI was the ability for us to be able to take the chat widget that Kendo provided and extend it, right? with the functionality that we needed for lazy loading of messages, which is something that they didn't support, and also injecting these types of meta or system messages that we mentioned earlier. And it was really cool that we could do that, but what we're not sure of is whether we really should have done that. And we'll find out further down the line. You know, when we get the latest release of Kendo UI, did we create ourselves a little maintenance nightmare, you know, where we potentially have to continuously now update things that might be broken because of how we extend it? We'll know in the following release. So it's something that was really cool to do, but it's also something that we're not quite sure of yet, how badly it's going to affect us in the future. Right. So I think what we'll do then is we're almost at the end of the session as well. What we'll do is just quickly take you through some of the things that was very, very difficult for us and some of the rewards that we got out of this whole process.
Yeah, I think for us when we started with our first implementation, just to get our contract signed with InfoBip was a nightmare.
And WhatsApp.
And WhatsApp, yeah. So InfoBip works with WhatsApp and they did all of that. So that took a long time. But we have this kind of project plan now where we help the clients do their business accounting, and then we go through the registration, and then we go through API setup and all of that. That is how we deal with that now. Validation process, the trials. We struggled to have our clients understand what they can send. They just want to use it. You know,
actually, before we start with that, the issue that we had as a software vendor that's sitting in between is WhatsApp saw us as the responsible party for all of the conversations that were going out, and we had to. It really took us almost a year to have them understand that we're actually just the technology provider, you know. Yes. And the rules are very strict. You'll see that, you know, eventually when a business signs up for a WhatsApp for Business account, you'll see in the verbiage that the business may be held liable for whatever types of messages flows through the system. And in this particular case, we needed to distance ourselves from that because we weren't actually in that mix at all from a business perspective.
Yeah, so then when you get your client to use WhatsApp, you must really help them to understand what they can send and that they need templates for sending and all of that. So that also took us some time. Yeah,
so WhatsApp's very strict. If you can't use that as a marketing tool. So when you have a conversation that's originating from the server, they're very, very strict on
the first message has to be one that is approved by a template. So you have to send the first message and then
to WhatsApp, they'll approve it and then you can use it.
Yeah, so that took some interaction with our first implementation when we did that, really just to help our clients understand how they can use it and how they can get their templates approved and all of that. But I think we're under control with that now.
Yeah.
And then once they start using it, then, oh my gosh, then they want to use it. Then they want to send everything by WhatsApp. So the more they use it, the quicker they adjust and the quicker they know what they want to send. And then it just explodes. Then they just want to do everything.
Yeah, as they start using it, like we say there, you then get the business people's minds, then the lights go on, you know, and then they say, oh, but can we use it to actually provision a loan from start to finish online through a WhatsApp conversation? You know, where you ask the question for them to provision these documents, you verify whether the documents are correct, and then you reply and they get a loan. It's crazy what people then start dreaming and seeing what's happening. Right, then from the consumer timeline perspective, you know, it's like we said, one of the goals were to try to make sure that we give people the ability to professionally and effectively see what's been happening with the consumer over time so that they can better assist them, and you've got a business visibility of what's going on, right? And if you notice the second bullet point, in one particular customer's case, they were using 4 separate independent systems to try to manage a customer experience. And with the implementation of the timeline and the drill-through capability and all of those pieces of functionality all coming into play at the end, we took 4 systems out and we supplied them with 1 system. So it's a lot less of a mental strain on the users, you know, where they continuously have to navigate backwards and forwards to different systems, log in there. Right, and that did result in ecstatic customers, like we say, but at least for a while, you know, until they get the next big idea. So for chat, right, it's like we said, we achieved the goal. We reduced turnaround times. The business is able to actually take on a lot more queries or new lines of business, a lot more self-sufficient. You know, a lot less interaction is required for users, actual system users with the consumers, right? So you reduce the burden on call center staff. You reduce the burden on the business itself. So therefore, the business is running more efficiently with less resources, or resources that's focused on servicing business requirements as opposed to just tending to user queries all the time. And yeah, I think we're just about out of time, but that was a brief journey in you know, quite a few things that came together for us to be able to provision this. So I think let's go over to questions if you might have.
No questions.
So either we covered everything, or cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.